Alright, so it's just a few minutes to the Jamhuri Day. Kenya will be celebrating Jamhuri Day tomorrow, being the 12th of December 2025. That is when Kenya always celebrates the Jamhuri Day, and we're just a few minutes to that date. And as this is happening, today is also the day that 54 individuals were conferred with the title of senior counsel in the country. President Ruto was conferring 54 advocates the title of senior counsel today, including 3 former presidents of the Law Society of Kenya. That is Mr. Nelson Harvey, of course now Nelson Harvey SC, and of course there was Eric Thiuri, who is now Eric Thiuri Senior Counsel, and PLO Lumumba, PLO Patrick Lochotieno Lumumba Senior Counsel, among other people. Other key dignitaries that were also conferred with that prestigious title in the practice of law includes the Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wasika Wetangula, who is now Moses Wasika Wetangula Senior Counsel, and of course the long-lasting chairperson of Gor Mahia, Ambrose Rachier, was also conferred that title today in State House, where President Ruto conferred 54 advocates the title of senior counsel. What we want to put before the mirror today, rather, is the statements that have come from the Kenyan political scene in the past 48 hours. First, let us admit that the Kenyan political scene has been a little bit dull in the past 48 hours, perhaps because of the preparation towards this event tomorrow, being the Jamhuri Day. But other than that, also because now people are heading towards the festive season, so political activities have started to reduce a little bit towards the festive season, and we are going to see a slowdown towards 25th of December and maybe a recap later on. Now, one of the 2 key things that occurred was the fact that yesterday the Committee for Multi-Party Democracy, CMD, were actually celebrating the International Human Rights Day. And in Kenya, the chairperson of that committee, being Mr. Kiraitu Murungi, coined that particular celebration of International Human Rights Day by the Committee of Multi-Party Democracy to be a Raila Odinga Day. And so in honoring Raila Odinga, a lot of statements were said in his of his journey, of course, because this is the way, as Murungi puts it, that the Committee for Multi-Party Democracy saw it fit to actually honor the late retired Prime Minister. And so among the statements that were made was a very good speech by Winnie Odinga, who is the daughter of the late Raila Amolo Odinga, and that speech was so well timed first, and also so well structured and well delivered, and it has a lot of political effect and impact that we will take a look at, because some of the statements that Winnie made we did not expect to be coming from Winnie, and we will detail them shortly. Then other than that, today, the United Opposition also have made public announcement, and we are looking at this public announcement as one of the announcements that now they are making towards the festive season, because 3 of the principals used this also as an opportunity to wish Kenyans a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So as we said towards the beginning of this episode, that a lot of political activities are now kind of taking abeyance. That statement that was made by the United Opposition will be a subject of our mirroring. So let's start with Winnie's statement. So Winnie starts by celebrating, of course, the International Human Rights Day, and she said that we sometimes forget that all humans are equal. And so she puts that in context in a very witty way. First, before even we take a look at this statement, let me put it out there for you that this statement that was done by Miss Winnie Odinga was actually very full of humor, and was delivered in a very beautiful way that you can take a look at it later on. Here we are just going to pick selectively what she said that are important in the Kenyan political scene now, and of course between now and 2027. So she says that especially in this country, we are treating equality as something that is very foreign. So she says that that comes to when we are queuing for services, or when it comes to having voices, be heard in decision making. So of course, just a little bit break before we delve deep into this speech by Winnie Odinga. Something as human rights concept is something that is very, very new globally. There used to exist civic political rights, of course, way prior. but the codification of basic human rights is something that is very new globally. Actually, in the global stage, other than 1948 Declaration, Universal Declaration, that now creates this particular rights, in the global stage, recognition of human rights begins very solid in the 1966 period, and that is the period where now human rights becomes an active talk. And so even in this region, the African region, one of the things that have been very difficult, that makes the enforcement of EU policies very, very hard, is the fact that recognition of human rights is something that is still very alien to African countries. They don't see it as something that is a major priority. There's just police rights, the rights of the states, and of course the rights of the citizens. But these basic human rights that we champion in Kenya a lot is actually a new thing in our region. That is a very shocking but truthful matter. And even for Kenya, it's 2010 that we are seeing now the recognition of human rights as a very solid thing. Prior to that, a lot of human rights violation were actually swept under because there was no solid codification of Bill of Rights like we have it right now in the Constitution. And so putting that in context, when there is an International Human Rights Day, even if it was later turned into Raila Odinga Day, we need to first understand where we are coming with these things called human rights that has given Kenyan democracy a very new energy in the past 3 elections, being a period of less than 15 years since we introduced the new constitution. And so Winnie says that this particular issue of human rights that we are dealing with is still an alien concept. When it comes to queuing of services, of course, you would see that certain dignitaries still treat the aspect of them being dignitaries superseding the fact that human rights are universal to everyone, and so they want to be treated way better than the ordinary citizen. And beyond that, when it comes to making decision, of course, she is talking about the fact that even in spaces like ODM party, being her late father's party, decisions of the party really do not consider younger voices. And so she's questioning the aspect of, having this particular human rights in the space of politics when it is not being recognized in the key basic needs that all human beings desire, like in decision making, of course, not being the ordinary basic needs, but basic political needs, like in decision making and inequality of offering and access to service. So she says that we're in a country where young people are first hindered from actually making a decisions about their future, and the older generations keep increasing that particular goalpost whenever we try to get near it. Now, that was a very impactful statement coming from Winnie for the young generation. She was saying that we are in this nation that we are still talking about human rights and equality. I'm talking about human rights just in context of the fact that this particular speech was being given in celebration of International Human Rights Day, but not majorly as the substance of this analysis. And she was saying that we are in a time where youths are actually hindered from making the decisions that matter in their future because resources are not there adequately for them to make those decisions that will impact them in the future. And even with the meager resources, if they try to actually steer themselves towards the future, the older generations keep shifting the goalpost. She goes ahead and says that now we have a crisis of culture, crisis of course of religion, and crisis of technology and tradition. And we have to embrace all these crises of culture. There is a massive change in culture right now, and that will impact the Kenyan political scene. Might not be in the 2027 major elections, but in the few elections after 2027 into 2032, difference in cultures and the new mind shift when it comes to cultures will be a thing. If right now people still vote alongside clans, perfect case in point is of course Mbere North here, where people still vote alongside clans. In the next 10 to 15 years, that's just like 3 elections away. Will this still be the issue with now the diversification of culture and the introduction of Western culture into the African space? Will this still be the voting plan? When it comes to religion, the way that religion has previously impacted our elections previously, including the previous elections of 2022, when Ruto won overwhelmingly because of the backup that came from religion. In the next 3 or 4 elections, 15 to 20 years in time, is religion still going to be a center point of having the masses to vote? And when we're talking about tradition vis-a-vis technology, for how long will our traditional way of how we vote as a country hold in the face of technology? If traditionally we used to do campaigns on top of the vehicles, now with the income of technology, things like TikTok, YouTube, are our campaign modules going to change? So Winnie is introducing this aspect that this particular conflict in the society right now, calls for a generational cooperation between the older generation and the younger generation to steer not only political parties but the leadership of the country forward. She says, of course, very, very importantly, that she gives an example that we are in a society, of course, still talking about equality, that women are not even equal to men. And for this, she makes a joke about the ODM party, where she says that a lady from Bondo can ask a question in Mombasa, and that question will be termed as politically rude. So she'd say that she will be termed as indisciplined. And when a man asks the same question in a not so kind manner in the very platform, then it's termed as leadership. So she's still talking about the double standards in the society that makes it hard not only for youth, but double standards for both youth and youths who are women in this particular Kenyan political space. And she says that when more often when an elderly person rather has a problem, and the most basic problem she gives example of is of their phone, then the person that they look for immediately in the surrounding is for a young person to fix it. And she just tries to put a picture for the people at the Committee for Multi-Party Democracy that this is something that makes the young people very, very mad these days, because if they can fix for you that problem that you always have in your phone, if you're an elderly member of the society watching this particular episode, in a minute, then just imagine the other things that they could also fix within a period of 1 minute. But it's just that they are not given these particular opportunities to show the elderly members of the societies what they got when it comes to bigger responsibilities. But when it comes to things that are very key to the elder members of the society and are new in the current phase of technology, then they run to. This just talks about of the conflict she's talking about that now requires a new look towards politics, a new approach towards politics, the conflict of technology and tradition. So she eulogized her father, saying that Raila Odinga is actually, because this was also a day when Raila Odinga was being honored by the CMD, and she was saying that Raila Odinga is someone that stood for power but believed that power comes from the will of the people and not the will of leaders. Now that was a very impactful statement, because now moving forward, not only for the people that were at the CMD, but the kind of politics that Winnie Odinga is introducing by herself into the Kenyan political space, people have said echoes her father kind of political way. And I was saying that her father stood for power, but knowing that power came from the will of the people and not the will of leaders, now mirrors or echoes a particular power move, or rather a particular political path or channel that Winnie Odinga will take. She said leadership is not about title, but it's about showing up every day and lifting up the people, and that is what Raila Odinga believed in. And so in giving an analogy of a particular incident that happened at the DCI offices when the father was actually blocked out, she introduces a procedure that might have been the blueprint, or rather the goodwill of Raila's political mechanism, but people did not pay attention to. Now, in just one sentence, Winnie summarizes Raila's political procedure as follows. 1, procedure first, pressure second, then we take action. And so that's a really beautiful way, because that statement, if you take a look at it and you mirror back how Raila used to do his politics, then you'd see he would first follow procedure, and where procedure failed, he'll introduce public pressure, and when public pressure was not making the other camp bend to his demands, then he would take action. So perhaps this is the path that Winnie now, not really perhaps, but this is the direction that she's giving the youth and the people that she believes should join her bandwagon in making sure that we have a country that is not bleeding every day and full of bullets. And she says the path will be first, we will follow procedure, and after procedure we will insert pressure, and after pressure is when now action will be taken. So in Kenya, institutions work like families divided over a dinner table. That is another statement of power that she made, saying that people do not sit and talk in these particular tables. Once they disagree, everyone walks away to their rooms. And she says that this particular way of running institution perhaps is the crumbling of the government, to the extent that even the president is losing hold of his government because of how institutions do not want to sit down with each other and talk. She Now ask leaders to embrace humor while changing the norms, saying that it cannot be so serious that there is no position of humor in changing these particular norms. And she says that bullets do not bring smiles. She of course adds that if we need to have particular country that moves forward, then people must smile when they are actually having these conversations. And of course that is the position of humor in changing the norms moving forward. But she says that if the younger people smile first, then they will be taken as not serious. So the older people, the older generation of the society must first smile for the younger generation to smile. She asks upon leaders to bring these two factions together, not being the people in government and the united opposition, no, but the younger generation and the older generation to have an holistic approach to Kenyan politics. Now, this reminds me of something. Sometimes back we were having a conversation with a friend who teaches German language, an Austrian friend who teaches German language, and they were of the opinion that when it comes to conversations mostly around the German people, then smiling is often prohibited because of the serious nature of conversations. And they were giving us an example that sometimes you'd look at German conversations and you realize they do not laugh. They only laugh when they are in social places. But when they're talking about politics, power, leadership, money, finance, things like that, they hardly smile. But now Winnie's approach is actually very interesting, saying that nothing can be so serious that there is no position of humor in it. But for this smile to actually make things work, it needs to come from the older generation, because if it comes from the younger generation, they might be taken for not being serious. So of course she says that we appreciate the fact that the older generation have to actually build this house that we require to move forward, but that does not exclude the positions of the younger people in coming up with the design, because appreciating in a very positive way, she says that this particular house that is being built for the future generation will be occupied by the generation that lives right now, but not by the generation that is building it. And so it requires that the generation that will occupy this house is also included in coming up with the designs of this house. She mentions that she's not tiptoeing and calls upon everyone to wear their gumboots and move forward with her, saying that now this is the position for the youth to rise and take position and ensure that we are not having bullets and blood every day, but we are having smiles and a system that works. Now, after recapping that position from Winnie, a very witty, impactful, and full of humor statement when it was being delivered, and a statement that now positions the talk that has been in the country for quite some time for the positions of the youth in this particular table of dialogue, moving into 2027, but also moving beyond into the future of Kenya, that the success of this country politically will only require that the youth and the older members of the society work hand in hand to ensure that the future of this country is secured for this generation and for the generations to follow. Away from Winnie is the United Opposition. Now, Rigathi yesterday did an exclusive interview with KTN. In this interview, he touched a bit on the recently concluded by-elections. And while being cornered with certain questions from the KTN reporter, Rigathi took a very calm and center position in answering these questions. And he said that the Democracy for Citizens Party should be celebrated, that out of the 24 by-elections that were being held across the nation, they took 3. And as a result, they took 3 out of 5 that they actually had prompted in this particular by-election, saying that a party that had lasted for less than just 7 months won 3 out of 5 of the party candidates that they had fronted for this by-election. So he was saying that this particular by-election was marred with a lot of violence, and that does not mean that even in regions where the DCP party won, being Kariobangi North Ward, Narok Ward, and Kisa East Ward in Kwisero constituency, Kakamega County, were exempted from this particular violence. And he says that violence was so strong even in these regions that had the violence not existed, then the votes that they got in these particular regions, of course, will also have skyrocketed. And so he celebrates this particular win as one that has demystified the fact that the DCP party is just a mountain Kenya party, in the sense that the DCP party won a seat 600 kilometers away from the mountain in Quisero constituency, that is Kisa East Ward. The DCP party penetrated the Rift Valley region and through a MA candidate won the Narok area, Narok Township Ward, and also in a cosmopolitan place like Nairobi, the DCP party won Kariobangi North, while they were contesting against dominant parties including the ruling party and the ODM party in the city. So he celebrates this particular win, and he did that in that particular exclusive interview. But when asked about the DCP party in Mbeere North and whether they are going to court, he said that the united opposition is jointly together for a united purpose of securing the win in 2027 and ensuring that President Ruto goes home. But that should not be interpreted as one unity of purpose to meddle in internal party affairs. And so he's saying, as a result of that, if the Democratic Party decides to actually go to court, then he wishes them well for the Mbeere North contest, saying very well that Mbeere North and Malava were actually not fair. But when asked whether or not he will support the Democratic Party in this move, he holds that he's not a lawyer, and so his contribution cannot go beyond what he has done in the campaigns in Mbeere North. He rather wants the government, in that particular exclusive interview, that whatever happened with the goons and the intimidation and the use of resources in the recently concluded by-elections will not be witnessed in 2027, saying that goons will be in their respective constituencies where they will be dealt with, and police will not be enough to be deployed everywhere across the country to support goonship activities. And so as a result, he says that you should not dance yourself weary before the main dance, telling President Ruto that 2027 major polls is where the main dance is at, and that is where, of course, the chaff will be separated from the grain. But away from that exclusive interview today, the united opposition has given a public announcement jointly. Of course, not present in this particular unity was Matiang'i, whose absence has been loud recently in the united opposition activities, and of course Martha Karua, but Eugene Wamalwa, of course JB Muturi, Kalonzo Musyoka, Linturi, and of course Rigathi Gachagua were present in this particular press conference. So quickly, let's take a look at what they said that have political importance now and moving forward into major polls. Now, Rigathi, today they are Rigathi first asked the rest of the united opposition and the Kenyans to focus moving forward. He addressed the major challenges in the country, of course, repeating from what he had said yesterday, is not matters tribalism, but matters theft, matters misappropriation of public funds. Today he added matters with education, of course capitation, and the health crisis. And he says the Kenyans are not divided alongside tribal lines, and President Ruto should not echo the tribal talk into Jamhuri Day tomorrow, but should address the real issues that are affecting Kenyans. So he wishes Kenyans a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, of course, including the media house, saying that major problem is Ruto's lies, and so the Kenyan people should focus on how to remove Ruto's lies in 2027, even if they are going into this particular festive season. In a very humorous way, he has now asked the Luhya people all to go home and make sure that they defend the gold in Ikolomani and in Luhya land from Ruto's grabbing, saying that that is a given gold to push or pull the Luhya people out of poverty, and they should not let that particular gold go to Kasongo. Muturi, who joined the other members after meeting with his lawyers, of course, in the Mbeere North issue, where now the lawyers of Justin Muturi and the Democratic Party intend to contest the elections in Mbeere North in the coming week, also had a moment to address the nation. And he says that this is one of the years when there is really nothing to celebrate in Jamhuri Day. There is mood of Jamhuri Day, and the day is coming tomorrow, but there is really nothing worth celebrating on this day. He accuses Ruto for using public coffers and still going ahead in front of the public to say that he has never taken a coin from the public. And so he challenges President Ruto to explain how he held 10,000 teachers in State House, paying 10,000 to each teacher, and how he held 10,000 chiefs and sub-chiefs in State House, paying the same 10,000 to each chief and sub-chief as a way of defending himself from the statements of not handling or not taking any coin from the public coffers. Justin B. Muturi says, while his particular salary is a matter of public notoriety. Now, Muturi promises that they are united to move and save this country from bad governance in 2027. As we said from the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, there has not been much political activity in the past 48 hours, but it's been so much pleasure detailing and recapping these two, coming from the statements and presser of the united opposition, but more importantly, the moving forward statements of Winnie Odinga of what the youth should do moving forward into 2027 and beyond. Until our next episode.